horrifying. A skeletal woman so starved that her ribs protrude sharply beneath her thin shirt. He did the unthinkable on a crowded flight full of strangers. She offered her breast to the infant son of Chicago's most notorious Mafia boss, so he could nurse. She had absolutely no idea that in the underworld that single act carries an ancient, sacred, and deadly name, Milk Mother. Once you become the Milk Mother of the Caldwell heir, your entire life, your twin babies, and your very soul belong to him, no matter how far you run, no matter how many tears you cry until there are none left. Ethan Caldwell will find you, and he will never, never let you go. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth. So we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. The plane shuddered through another pocket of October 2025 turbulence, the kind that made even the most seasoned flyers grip their armrests. Lily Harper sat in the last row of economy, wedged between the window and the narrow aisle, her thin frame curled protectively around her 7-month-old twins, Mia and Caleb. The babies were mercifully quiet for once, bundled in mismatched blankets she'd bought secondhand from a church basement sale. Her own coat, threadbare denim she'd worn since high school, was draped over all 3 of them like a pitiful shield against the recycled air that never quite warmed. Lily hadn't slept more than 3 hours in the last 48. The trip to visit her dying aunt in Milwaukee had drained what little she had left. Bus fare scraped from tips at the diner, a borrowed car seat from a neighbor who barely spoke to her anymore, and the constant gnawing fear that one missed. Rent payment would mean eviction from the roach-infested, 1-bedroom on Chicago's far south side. Her bank account hovered at $17.43. The twins' formula was running low. She'd been watering it down for days, telling herself it was temporary just until the next paycheck. Her breasts ached constantly, still full, still producing, even though the doctors had told her 14 months ago that her body might never stop after losing little Emma to SIDS in the middle of one endless freezing night. She stared at the seatback pocket in front of her, where the safety card was creased from 100 hands, and tried not to think about how thin her wrists looked lately, how her ribs pressed against her skin when she breathed too deeply. Malnutrition, the clinic nurse had whispered last month. Sleep deprivation. Stress. The words had landed like accusations. Up in first class, separated by a thin curtain and a world of money, Ethan Caldwell felt the same turbulence in his chest. He sat rigid in the wide leather seat, custom-tailored black suit, straining slightly across shoulders that had once carried the weight of far worse burdens than a crying infant. Noah, 9 weeks old, fair-skinned, like his father, with the same shock of dark hair, screamed with a raw, desperate edge that cut through the cabin like broken glass. Ethan had tried everything the nanny had packed: warmed bottle pacifier, gentle rocking that felt absurd in arms more accustomed to issuing quiet orders than cradling helplessness. Nothing worked. The guilt was a living thing inside him, clawing deeper with every wail. Isabella had died, bringing Noah into the world, hemorrhage on the operating table, gone before the doctors could even finish the sentence. Ethan had stood there in sterile scrubs, watching the monitors flatline, feeling the empire he'd built brick by bloody brick suddenly mean nothing. He was the boss of the Caldwell outfit, the last old-school family still holding real power in Chicago's shadows, shipping construction protection rackets dressed up as legitimate business. Men crossed streets when they saw his car. Yet here he was, helpless, terrified his son would starve because he couldn't give him what a mother could. He glanced at the 2 bodyguards seated nearby, silent, watchful, useless in this moment, and felt the old rage rise again. Not at them. At himself. At the life that had left him widowed at 38, raising an heir alone, while rival crews circled like wolves smelling blood. Then he heard her voice, soft, timid, almost swallowed by the engine noise. "Excuse me. Sir, I think your baby is hungry. Really hungry." Ethan turned. She stood in the aisle just beyond the curtain, one twin balanced on her hip, the other cradled in the crook of her arm. Lily Harper. Thin to the point of fragility, dark circles under hazel eyes, hair pulled back in a messy knot that had started slipping hours ago. Her jeans were faded and patched at the knee. Her sweater had a small hole near the cuff. She looked like someone the wind could blow away, yet she stood there, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and something fiercer instinct, maybe. Ethan's gaze locked on hers. For a split second, the entire cabin narrowed to that connection. I'm sorry," she stammered, voice barely above a whisper. I'm a mother. I know that cry. He's rooting. He needs something real. Not the bottle. The words landed like a blow. Ethan felt his throat close. Real. The word echoed everything he'd been denying for 9 weeks. One of the bodyguards started to rise protective reflex, but Ethan lifted a hand sharp. Stay. He studied her. Poor. Exhausted. Carrying twins who looked healthier than she did. Yet her eyes held no calculation, no fear of who he might be. Only recognition. Shared grief, perhaps, though she didn't know his story yet. Lily shifted her weight, wincing as Mia fussed against her chest. I wouldn't normally. I mean, it's crazy, but if you'd let me try just for a minute. In private. The lavatory. I still produce. After my last baby. My body never got the message she was gone. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Ethan felt something crack inside him, guilt, remorse, a violent surge of protectiveness he couldn't name. This woman, stranger, destitute, carrying her own invisible wounds, was offering the one thing he couldn't provide. He stood towering over her, yet careful not to loom. Follow me. The first-class lavatory was larger than economy's, but still impossibly small for 2 adults and a baby. Ethan hesitated at the door, every instinct screaming that he should not hand his son to anyone ever. But Noah's cries had taken on a frantic edge, tiny fists flailing. Lily's hands trembled as she reached for the infant. What's his name, Noah? She cradled him gently as if he were made of glass. Hi, Noah. It's okay, sweetheart. Ethan stepped outside, closing the door with a soft click. He leaned against the bulkhead, fists clenched, listening to the sudden hush. The cries tapered off, replaced by small rhythmic sounds, suckling, swallowing peace. Minutes stretched. Ethan felt the storm inside him rage harder. Who was she? Why did this feel like fate instead of charity? Why did the thought of her walking away make his chest ache like a fresh wound? When the door finally opened, Lily emerged, holding a sleeping. Noah's face relaxed, tiny fist curled against her sweater. Milk stained the fabric in small damp spots, evidence of the miracle she'd performed. He's out, she whispered, voice hoarse with emotion. He ate well. He'll probably sleep for hours now. Ethan took his son carefully, feeling the warmth of her body still lingering on Noah's skin. Their fingers brushed. Electricity shot through him, sharp, undeniable. Your name, he said, voice rougher than intended. Lily. Lily Harper. Ethan Caldwell. He wanted to say more thank you, didn't feel big enough, but the words stuck. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick black card embossed with only a phone number in gold foil. Call me when we land. Please. I owe you more than words can cover. Lily stared at the card as if it might bite. That's not necessary. I was just helping. In my world, Ethan said quietly, everything has a price. And what you just did. That's priceless. She looked up at him, then really looked, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Not just gratitude. Something deeper, fiercer. A man who had everything except this. A man suddenly undone by a single act of kindness from the most unlikely source. Lily stepped back, clutching her twins tighter. I should get back to my seat. Ethan watched her walk away, thin shoulders, hunched babies balanced precariously. He felt the pull already violent, consuming, terrifying. This woman who had nothing had just given him everything. And in that moment, beneath the guilt and the power and the endless war he waged in the shadows, Ethan Caldwell felt the first spark of something he'd thought died with Isabella. Love. Sudden. Overwhelming. Impossible. He didn't know her story yet. Didn't know about the nights she'd spent shivering on a mattress on the floor because the heat had been cut off again, or the way she'd sold her wedding ring to buy diapers, or the way she woke every morning tasting panic, because the twins were all she had left. But he felt it, the gap between them was a chasm, and yet she had crossed it without hesitation. As the plane descended toward Chicago, Ethan held Noah close and made a silent vow. Whatever it took, he would find her again, protect her, because Lily Harper had just fed his son from her own body, and in doing so, she had unknowingly stepped into his world. And Ethan Caldwell never let go of what was his. Here is a quiet, condensed moment of the emotional stillness that followed. Lily returned to her seat, legs shaking. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She didn't understand why her heart felt so full and so broken at the same time. A stranger's baby had nursed at her breast, and for the first time in 14 months the ache in her chest had eased just a little. Across the curtain, Ethan stared at the sleeping child in his arms, the weight of remorse and gratitude warring inside him like thunder. He had built an empire on control. Now, for the first time, he felt something he could not command. And somewhere in the space between economy and first class, two broken souls had brushed against each other, and nothing would ever be the same. The plane touched down at O'Hare just after 9 o'clock on that cold October evening in 2025, the runway lights smearing into long golden streaks through the rain-streaked window. Lily Harper felt the jolt in her bones, the same way she felt every small shock these days, as if the world were reminding her how fragile everything was. She gathered her things slowly, methodically. The 2 canvas totes that held everything the twins owned. The diaper bag with the broken zipper she'd repaired 3 times with duct tape. The folded stroller frame she'd bought for $12 at a yard sale and still owed her neighbor 20 more for borrowing the car seat. Mia fussed against her chest. Caleb's tiny hand clutched the frayed collar of Lily's sweater. She pressed her lips to the top of his head, breathing in the faint baby shampoo scent that was the only clean thing left in her life. She had not looked back toward first class since leaving the lavatory. She couldn't. The memory of Ethan Caldwell's dark eyes, steady, unreadable, burning with something she didn't dare name, had lodged inside her like a shard of glass. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his large, careful hands taking Noah from her arms, felt again the accidental brush of his fingers against hers. It had lasted less than a second. It had lasted forever. Lily stood in the aisle waiting for the crowd to thin. Her legs trembled from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten since the free pretzels on the flight. Her stomach clawed at itself, a dull, constant ache she'd learned to ignore months ago. When she finally stepped into the jetway, the black card was still tucked inside her bra, hidden where no one could steal it, where she could pretend it didn't exist. The gold foil number glinted faintly whenever she moved. She hated how much she wanted to keep it. Outside baggage claim, the terminal was chaos families, reuniting business travelers, striding past with expensive rolling cases, the smell of wet coats and burnt coffee. Lily pushed the stroller with one hand, balanced Mia on her hip with the other, Caleb strapped to her chest in a carrier she'd fashioned from an old bedsheet. The twins were quiet now, too tired to cry. She was almost to the exit doors when she heard her name. Miss Harper. The voice was low, controlled, unmistakable. Lily froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she felt dizzy. Ethan Caldwell stood perhaps 10 feet away, flanked by 2 men in dark overcoats, who scanned the crowd with professional detachment. He wore the same black suit from the plane, but now a charcoal wool coat hung open over it, the kind of coat that cost more than Lily's rent for 6 months. Noah was nestled inside a navy carrier against his chest, sleeping peacefully, cheeks pink and full. Ethan's face was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, fathomless eyes, were locked on her with an intensity that made the air feel too thin to breathe. Lily's mouth went dry. I didn't think you'd... I said I'd find you. His tone was quiet, almost gentle, but there was steel beneath it. You didn't call. She swallowed. I didn't think you meant it. People say things. Not me. He took 1 step closer. The bodyguards shifted slightly, creating a loose perimeter around them. Lily felt the sudden awareness of eyes on her passers-by, glancing, then looking away quickly when they saw the men. She wanted to shrink into the floor. Ethan's gaze dropped to the twins, then back to her face. Something flickered across his features, pain, maybe, or recognition. You're exhausted, he said. It wasn't a question. Lily forced a small, polite smile, the one she used on difficult customers at the diner. We're fine. Thank you again for letting me help Noah. She started to turn the stroller toward the doors. Wait. The single word stopped her, like a hand on her shoulder. Ethan reached into his coat and withdrew a plain white envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed with a small gold sticker. He held it out. Lily stared at it as if it might explode. It's not charity, he said quietly. It's gratitude. There's enough here for 3 months, rent, groceries, whatever you need for the babies. No strings. Her breath hitched. 3 months. The number felt obscene. She could see the future flashing before her, heat that stayed on formula that wasn't watered-down, shoes without holes, maybe even a doctor visit that didn't end in tears. And then the shame rushed in, hot, humiliating, suffocating. She shook her head, eyes burning. I can't take your money. You already took something far more precious, Ethan replied. His voice dropped lower. You gave my son peace when I couldn't, when no one else could. Do you know what that means to me? Lily's throat closed. She looked down at Caleb's tiny head, felt Mia's weight pulling at her aching shoulder. She thought of the eviction notice taped to her door last week, the landlord's cold voice saying 30 days are out. She thought of the nights she'd sat on the fire escape, wrapped in a blanket, wind cutting through her thin sweater, whispering to the stars that she was sorry, that she was trying, that she was so tired of failing. And she thought of the man in front of her, wealthy beyond imagination, powerful enough to command silence in a crowded airport, yet standing here with raw desperation in his eyes because his son had needed her. I don't want to be bought, she whispered. I'm not buying you. Ethan's voice cracked just a hair, but she heard it. I'm asking you to let me repay a debt, one I will carry for the rest of my life, whether you take this or not. Silence stretched between them. Then slowly Lily reached out. Her fingers shook so badly the envelope almost slipped. When she took it, their hands brushed again. This time neither pulled away immediately. The contact lasted 2 heartbeats, long enough for Lily to feel the warmth of his skin, the faint tremor in his fingers, the pulse that raced beneath the calm surface. Ethan exhaled a sound of relief so profound it almost hurt to hear. Thank you, he said. Lily couldn't speak. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She swiped at them angrily, embarrassed. Ethan glanced toward the exit. May I walk you to your ride? I take the bus. His jaw tightened. For a moment, something dangerous flashed behind his eyes, anger not at her, but at the world that had let her become this thin, this weary, this alone. Then let me drive you home. Lily opened her mouth to refuse, then closed it. The envelope felt heavy in her hand. The thought of getting on another crowded bus with 2 crying babies and no seats left made her want to sob. Okay, she whispered. The black Escalade waited at the curb, sleek tinted windows engine already running. One of the bodyguards opened the rear door without a word. Lily hesitated, then stepped inside. The leather was warm. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. She buckled the twins into the waiting car seats, new, top of the line, still smelling of packaging. Someone had anticipated everything. Ethan slid in beside her, Noah still asleep against his chest. The door closed with a soft, expensive thunk. As the vehicle pulled away from the terminal, Lily stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. She felt like she was watching someone else's life. Inside, the silence was thick. Then Ethan spoke, voice low enough that only she could hear. I don't know your story, Lily, but I know what it costs to give what you gave tonight. I know what it means to lose someone and keep going anyway. Lily turned her head slowly. His face was half in shadow, but the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. My wife died giving birth to him, he said quietly. I couldn't save her. I couldn't even save my son from crying. Until you. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spread through Lily's chest. I lost a baby too, she heard herself say. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Emma. Sudden infant death. 14 months ago. I woke up and she was gone. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment as if the words had struck him physically. When he opened them again, they were wet. I'm sorry, he whispered. Lily's throat burned. Me too. Neither spoke again for a long time. The Escalade moved through the city past, glittering downtown, towers past neighborhoods. Lily knew too well the ones with boarded windows and flickering streetlights. When they reached her block, the contrast felt obscene. The gleaming black SUV idling in front of the sagging 3-flat with peeling paint and trash bags piled on the stoop. Lily unbuckled the twins with shaking hands. Ethan got out first, opening her door, holding an umbrella over her as she stepped into the rain. He walked her to the front door, body shielding her from the wind. At the chipped threshold, he stopped. If you ever need anything, he said, anything at all, call that number, day or night. Lily nodded, unable to meet his eyes. He reached out slowly, carefully, and brushed a raindrop from her cheek with the pad of his thumb. The touch was so tender it felt like violence. Lily gasped softly. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Ethan's hand froze. For one endless second, neither moved. Then he stepped back, jaw-tight eyes blazing with something fierce and unguarded. Good night, Lily Harper. He turned and walked back to the car, shoulders rigid, every line of his body screaming restraint. Lily stood in the doorway until the taillights disappeared. Only then did she allow herself to sink to the floor, envelope clutched to her chest, tears coming in silent, wrenching waves. She had fed a stranger's child. She had accepted money from a man who could buy and sell her entire life 10 times over. And she had felt God help her the first dangerous spark of something that felt dangerously, terrifyingly like love. Across the city, in the quiet of his Gold Coast penthouse, Ethan Caldwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, Noah asleep in the nursery behind him. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He had spent his life controlling everything, territory, men, outcomes. Tonight, for the first time, he felt something he could not control. A woman with nothing had given him everything, and the debt he owed her was no longer just money. It was his heart, and he knew with a certainty that terrified him that he would burn the world down before he let her suffer another night alone. 2 days passed like a fever dream. Lily Harper spent them in the same small, dim apartment that had become both prison and sanctuary. The envelope from Ethan Caldwell sat unopened on the chipped kitchen table, a white rectangle glowing against the scarred wood like something from another world. She had counted the money once $5,000 in crisp hundreds, then quickly stuffed it back inside and slid the envelope under the mattress, as if hiding it could make it less real. She told herself she would return it. She told herself she was not the kind of woman who accepted handouts from strangers, no matter how kind their eyes or how gently they brushed rain from her cheek. But every time she looked at the twins, pink-cheeked, now fed properly for the first time in weeks, the resolve cracked a little more. Mia had smiled at her yesterday, a real gummy smile, the first since the cold snap that had frozen the pipes and left them without hot water for 3 days. Caleb had slept through the night, no longer waking every hour with hungry whimpers. Lily had wept silently over their crib, ashamed of the relief that felt like betrayal. She had not spent a single dollar. On the third morning, October 28th, 2025, she woke to pounding on the door. Not the landlord this time. Something heavier, more deliberate. Lily's heart lurched into her throat. She scooped the twins from their shared crib, clutching them against her chest as she crept to the peephole. Outside stood 2 men in dark coats, the same 2 who had shadowed Ethan at the airport. One held a sleek black phone to his ear. The other stared directly at the peephole as though he knew she was watching. Miss Harper, the one with the phone, called, voice calm and professional. "Mr. Caldwell requests your presence. It's urgent. About Noah." The name hit her like cold water. Lily's knees buckled. She leaned against the doorframe, breath shallow. Noah, the baby she had nursed on a crowded plane. The baby whose father had looked at her like she had handed him back his soul. She opened the door, 2 inches chain still latched. "What's wrong with him?" Her voice was small, trembling. The man with the phone lowered it slightly. "He won't take a bottle. Hasn't eaten properly since the flight. He's losing weight. The pediatrician is concerned." Lily felt the floor tilt beneath her. The hallway light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. "I'm not a doctor," she whispered. I just helped once. You're the only one who has helped at all." The man's tone held no judgment, only fact. "Mr. Caldwell is asking. No, he's begging for you to come, just to see if you can calm him again. There's a car waiting. Everything will be taken care of. You and the twins." Lily looked down at Mia and Caleb. They stared back with wide, trusting eyes. She thought of the last time she had seen Noah, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, milk-drunk and content. She thought of how her own body still ached every time she heard a baby cry. How the milk came unbidden, useless, a cruel reminder of what she had lost. She thought of the $5,000 hidden under the mattress. "I need to change their diapers," she said faintly. "We'll wait." 20 minutes later, Lily stepped out of the building she had lived in for 4 years, carrying 2 babies and a diaper bag that smelled faintly of mildew. The black Escalade idled at the curb like a sleeping panther. One of the men opened the rear door. Inside were 2 brand-new car seats still wrapped in protective plastic, and a soft cashmere blanket folded neatly on the seat. Lily hesitated on the sidewalk, wind tugging at her thin sweater. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez, the neighbor who sometimes watched the twins for a few dollars, stood on her stoop, arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. Lily felt the weight of judgment, of pity, of something worse. She ducked her head and climbed inside. The drive was silent, except for the soft hum of the engine and the twins' occasional coos. They left the south side behind, crossed the river, entered streets lined with iron gates and stone facades. When the vehicle finally stopped in front of a towering Gold Coast building, glass and steel rising like a monument, Lily's breath caught. The doorman wore white gloves. The elevator required a keycard. The penthouse doors opened directly into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. Ethan Caldwell waited there, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair slightly disheveled. Noah cradled against his shoulder. The baby's face was flushed and miserable, tiny fists clenched in frustration. The moment Ethan saw Lily, something raw and desperate flashed across his face. Relief so intense it bordered on pain. "Lily," he breathed. She couldn't speak. The opulence pressed against her like a physical force, marble floors, modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering lake. Everything smelled of clean linen and money. Everything screamed the distance between them. Ethan took 1 step forward, then stopped as though afraid she might bolt. "He's been crying for hours," he said quietly. "Nothing works. Not the bottle, not rocking, not anything. I thought, maybe..." Lily looked at Noah. The baby's eyes were red-rimmed cheeks streaked with tears. Her chest ached in recognition. "I can try," she whispered. Ethan led her to a nursery that looked like something from a magazine. Soft blues and creams. A massive crib carved from pale wood. A rocking chair upholstered in velvet. He handed Noah over with careful reverence. The moment the infant settled against her chest, he stilled. His small mouth rooted instinctively. Lily felt the familiar pull, the warm rush of milk. She sat in the rocking chair, unbuttoning her sweater with shaking fingers, shielding herself as best she could. Ethan turned his back immediately, giving her privacy, but he did not leave the room. The only sounds were Noah's soft suckling and the creak of the rocking chair. Minutes passed. Lily closed her eyes, tears slipping beneath her lashes. She felt the baby's warmth, heard his contented sighs, and something inside her cracked wide open. Grief, gratitude, shame, longing, they poured through her in a violent rush. When Noah finally unlatched and drifted into sleep, Lily looked up. Ethan was watching her, not the baby, but her. His eyes were wet. His hands were clenched at his sides. "You saved him," he said hoarsely. Again, Lily swallowed. He just needed what he needed. Ethan took a step closer, then another. He knelt beside the chair, bringing his face level with hers. "I can't keep asking you to do this," he said, "but I can't watch him starve either. And I can't," his voice broke. "I can't let you go back to that apartment. Not tonight. Not ever if you'll let me help." Lily's heart stuttered. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "You belong wherever you want to be," he answered fiercely. "But I'm asking you to stay. Just for tonight. For the twins. For Noah. For me." The last words were barely audible. Lily looked around the nursery, the crib that cost more than she made in a year, the soft light filtering through silk curtains, the man kneeling before her like she was something sacred. She thought of the cold nights, the empty cupboards, the eviction notice she had torn down and hidden in the trash. She thought of the way Ethan's hand had trembled when he brushed the rain from her cheek. She thought of how Noah had quieted the instant he was in her arms, and she felt the terrifying, overwhelming surge of something she had no name for. Something that felt like coming home and falling into fire all at once. "Okay," she breathed. "Just for tonight." Ethan exhaled a sound of pure, shattered relief. He stood offering his hand. Lily took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, steady. Neither of them let go. Outside in the hallway, one of the bodyguards spoke quietly into his phone. "Boss says she's staying. Clear the guest wing. And double security on the perimeter. Kowalczyk's crew has been asking questions about the woman from the airport." Ethan heard the words, but did not react. His focus was entirely on the thin, exhausted woman beside him, the woman who had twice given his son life when he could not. He led her to a guest suite, soft bed, fresh linens, a crib already set up for the twins. At the door, he paused. "If you need anything at all, there's a button by the bed. It goes straight to me." Lily nodded, throat too tight to speak. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, eyes burning with unspoken things. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders rigid every step, a battle against the urge to stay. Inside the suite, Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, twins asleep in her arms. She looked at the wealth surrounding her, the thick carpet, the crystal chandelier, the view of the city that had never once looked back at her, and felt the violent tearing inside her chest. She had nothing. She had everything. And the man who had given it to her was downstairs right now, staring out over the same glittering city, feeling the same tearing. Because love's sudden, impossible burning had found them both. And neither knew how to survive it. The penthouse nursery was quiet now, save for the soft ticking of a silver clock on the mantel and the faint, even breathing of 3 sleeping babies. Noah lay in the carved crib, cheeks flushed with contentment. Mia and Caleb shared the wide daybed in the corner, tiny limbs tangled in cashmere blankets that felt impossibly soft against Lily's calloused fingertips. Lily stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring down at the glittering lake far below. The city lights stretched out like scattered diamonds, beautiful, cold, untouchable. She felt like one of the moths that sometimes fluttered against her apartment window back home, drawn to the glow, doomed to shatter against the glass. She had showered in the guest suite's marble bathroom, hot water that never ran out, thick towels that smelled of lavender shampoo in glass bottles that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Her own clothes felt humiliating against her skin. Now the thin sweater with its frayed cuffs, jeans worn so thin at the knees they were almost transparent. She had combed her hair with shaking fingers, trying to look less like the desperate woman she knew she was. A soft knock at the nursery door made her jump. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. He had changed into a charcoal sweater and dark slacks, sleeves pushed to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and faint, faded scars. He looked tired, but the exhaustion in his eyes was nothing compared to the storm raging behind them. "They're all asleep," he said, voice low. "Thank you." Lily nodded, throat too tight for words. He moved to stand beside her at the window, not too close, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. The contrast was unbearable. His presence solid and commanding, hers fragile and fraying. "I need to explain something to you," he began. "Something about why I can't simply thank you and let you walk away." Lily's stomach twisted. She had sensed it, the weight behind his gratitude, the way his eyes lingered on her as though she were something precious and perilous at once. Ethan exhaled slowly. My family. We're old Chicago. Irish roots that go back to the days of Prohibition. There are traditions, codes that still matter more than money or laws in certain circles. He paused, searching for words. In the old ways, when a woman willingly gives her milk to the child of the head of the family, the heir, she becomes more than a helper. She becomes milk mother, sacred, bound to the child as if she had borne him, and because the child is the future of the family, she becomes bound to the family itself. Lily's breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan turned to face her, fully eyes dark and intense. In practical terms, it means you are under my protection now. Officially. Irrevocably. Other families, rival families will hear about this. They already are. And in their eyes, you are no longer just a kind stranger. You are part of the Caldwell line. Touching you would be an act of war. Horror crept up Lily's spine like ice water. I didn't know. I know. His voice cracked with remorse. I should have warned you on the plane. But I was drowning, Lily. I was watching my son waste away, and then you appeared offering the one thing I couldn't give him. I was selfish. I let it happen without telling you the cost. Lily backed up a step until her shoulders hit the window glass. Cold seeped through her sweater. So I'm trapped, no. The word came out fierce. Never trapped, but you are in danger if you leave. The Kowalczyk crew has already sent feelers discreet questions about the woman who fed the Caldwell heir on a commercial flight. Word travels fast in this world. Lily's knees gave out. She slid down the wall until she sat on the thick carpet, arms wrapped around herself. Tears burned her eyes. I just wanted to help, she whispered. I just wanted to stop the crying. I didn't want this. Ethan knelt in front of her, slowly, carefully, as though approaching something wild and wounded. I know, he said again, and I hate myself for pulling you into it. But I swear to you on my son's life, I will protect you. I will protect your twins. I will burn every bridge I have if that's what it takes to keep you safe. Lily looked up at him through tear-blurred vision. His face was carved with anguish, deep lines of guilt and longing, and something fiercer, something that made her heart stutter. How long? She asked, voice barely audible. Ethan swallowed. 10 days. Give me 10 days to get Noah transitioned to formula. To bring in lactation consultants, pediatric specialists, whatever it takes. 10 days to make sure he's strong enough without you. After that, if you still want to leave, I'll arrange everything. A new place, safe, secure, far from Chicago if you want. Money for a fresh start. Security that will follow you without you ever knowing. I'll honor whatever you decide. Lily's chest ached with the violence of her emotions. Fear, shame, gratitude, and something darker. Something that terrified her most of all. The growing, burning pull toward the man kneeling before her. She thought of her apartment, the cracked ceiling, the radiator that hissed, but never warmed. The nights she had sat on the floor with the twins, wrapped in every blanket they owned, rocking them while the wind howled through broken window. Seals. She thought of the landlord's sneering voice last month. You got 3 days, sweetheart, or you're out. She thought of selling her mother's wedding ring for $47 at a pawn shop just to buy formula. And she thought of this penthouse, the warmth, the safety, the way Noah's small body had relaxed against her like he belonged there. She thought of Ethan, his trembling hand at the airport, his hoarse voice confessing his wife's death, the way he looked at her now, as though she were the only light left in his world. I'll stay, she whispered. 10 days. Relief crashed across Ethan's face like a wave. He bowed his head for a moment, shoulders shaking with the force of what he held back. Thank you, he breathed. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a single sheet of thick cream paper, a simple contract typed in clear black ink. 10 days. Room and board for Lily and the twins. Full medical care for all 3 babies. A stipend for personal needs. Complete confidentiality. And at the end of the period, unrestricted freedom to leave with no further obligation or pursuit. Lily read it twice, hands trembling so badly the paper rattled. Ethan handed her a pen, sleek, heavy, engraved with a tiny shamrock. She hesitated. Then she signed. Lily Harper. Ethan took the contract, folded it carefully, and placed it inside his sweater pocket over his heart. I'll have my lawyer notarize it tonight, he said quietly. It's binding. You're safe here. Lily nodded, numb. Ethan stood, offering his hand again. She took it. This time he didn't let go immediately. His thumb brushed the back of her knuckles once, twice, a gesture so tender it felt like a brand. Get some rest, he murmured. I'll be right down the hall if you need anything. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused back to her. Lily? Yes, I never thought I'd feel anything again after Isabella died. I thought that part of me was gone forever. His voice was raw. Then you stepped onto that plane, and everything changed. He didn't wait for a response. He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Lily stood alone in the nursery, surrounded by wealth she could never have imagined, holding the weight of a promise she barely understood. She sank into the rocking chair, pulled her knees to her chest, and let the tears come silent, wrenching, unstoppable. She was terrified. She was exhausted. She was falling helplessly, hopelessly into the arms of a man who could destroy worlds to keep her safe. And somewhere deep inside, in the place where grief and hope fought their endless war, she knew he was falling too. Outside in the shadowed hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes closed, fists clenched. He had just bound a woman who deserved sunlight and freedom to a world of shadows and blood, and yet the thought of letting her go felt like tearing his own heart from his chest. He pressed a hand over the pocket where the contract rested, felt the faint warmth of the paper against his skin. 10 days. 10 days to prove she could trust him. 10 days to convince himself he was worthy of the miracle she had brought into his life. Because Ethan Caldwell, ruthless, powerful, broken, had never wanted anything the way he wanted Lily Harper, and the wanting was violent. And it was only beginning. The first week in the Gold Coast penthouse passed in a strange, suspended rhythm, like holding your breath underwater and discovering you could still breathe. Lily moved through the days in a haze of gratitude and terror. Mornings began with the soft coos of 3 babies waking in unison. She nursed Noah first, his small body now filling out cheeks, rounding with the milk only she could give, then fed the twins their bottles while sunlight poured through windows that never showed a single smudge. The nursery smelled of clean cotton and warm milk instead of mildew and despair. Every breath felt like theft. She wore clothes that had appeared overnight in the guest suite closet, soft cotton dresses in gentle colors, nursing tops with hidden panels, new underwear still in packages, socks that actually matched. She had cried the first time she opened the drawer and saw them simple, perfect things she had never been able to afford. She had cried again when she realized none of them had tags with prices. They had simply been given. Ethan was always there, not hovering, never crowding, but present in the doorway during feedings in the kitchen, when she warmed bottles sitting in the leather armchair at night with a book he never read because his eyes kept drifting to her face. He spoke little at first. When he did, his voice was careful, measured as though every word cost him something. Lily watched him the way one watches a storm on the horizon. Beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. On the 4th night after the babies were settled, she found him in the living room staring at the city skyline. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the marble table beside him. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of distant buildings and a single floor lamp. He looked up when she entered. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. Lily shook her head. "I keep waiting for someone to come and take all this away, like it's a dream I'll wake up from on a cold floor with the babies crying." Ethan's throat worked. He gestured to the sofa opposite him. She sat perched on the very edge, hands folded tightly in her lap. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, he spoke, voice rough. "I used to think I had control. Over the city, over the families, over my own life. Then Isabella died, and I realized I controlled nothing that mattered." Lily's chest ached at the name. She had heard it, whispered by the housekeeper, seen the framed photograph on the nursery dresser, a laughing woman with dark hair and kind eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, then really looked, and something in his expression fractured. "You remind me of her," he said. "Not the way you look, the way you love, fiercely." Without asking for anything in return, Lily's eyes filled. "I don't know how to do anything else. Even when I had nothing left to give, I still gave. It's the only thing that ever made sense." A muscle ticked in Ethan's jaw. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've spent my life taking," he said. "Territory. Loyalty. Lives when I had to. I told myself it was necessary. That power kept the people I cared about safe. But the only person I couldn't protect was the one who mattered most." He looked away, voice dropping to a whisper. "I failed her. And I was failing Noah until you walked onto that plane." Lily's tears spilled over. She wiped them quickly, ashamed. "Don't," Ethan said softly. "Don't hide them. Not from me." She met his eyes. The storm inside him was visible now. Guilt, remorse, longing, all of it raging behind the calm surface. "I don't know how to be here," she admitted. "I feel like an intruder. Like I'm stealing air I don't deserve." Ethan stood, crossed the space between them in 2 strides. Knelt before her again, the powerful man who commanded respect from hardened criminals, now on his knees before a woman who owned 3 pairs of shoes total. "You're not stealing," he said fiercely. "You're giving. Again, every time you hold my son, every time you smile at your twins like they hung the moon. Every time you breathe in this place that never felt like home until you walked into it. Lily's breath hitched. Ethan lifted a hand, slowly telegraphing every movement, and brushed a tear from her cheek. The touch was electric. Neither of them moved. Then, as though pulled by gravity, he leaned closer. Lily's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. He stopped a breath away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint tremor in his jaw. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. Lily's lips parted. No sound came out. Instead, she closed the distance. Their mouths met soft at first, tentative questioning. Then something broke. Ethan's hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head like she was made of glass. The kiss deepened, hungry, desperate years of grief and loneliness pouring into it. Lily clutched his sweater, fingers twisting in the soft wool, pulling him closer. It was not gentle. It was survival. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you stepped out of that lavatory," he confessed, voice raw. "Since you handed me my son and looked at me like I wasn't a monster." Lily's tears fell onto his collar. "I don't know what you are," she whispered, "but I know what you've been to me. Kind, gentle, safe. In a world that's never been any of those things." Ethan pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'm not safe, Lily," he said quietly. "Not really. The life I lead, it's dangerous. People want what I have. They'll use anyone to get it." She swallowed. "I know, but I swear to you," his voice cracked, "I will spend every breath I have keeping you and the children safe, even if it means burning everything down." Lily searched his face, saw the truth there, the torment, the love, the absolute certainty. She lifted a trembling hand and cupped his cheek. "Then burn it," she whispered, "if that's what it takes." Ethan exhaled a broken, shuddering sound. He kissed her again, slower, this time reverent like worship. When they parted, he stayed on his knees, arms wrapped around her waist, head resting against her stomach. Lily threaded her fingers through his hair. For the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. Outside, in the shadowed streets below, two men in dark coats stood beneath a street lamp, watching the penthouse windows. One spoke quietly into a phone. "She's still there, the woman from the plane, the milk mother." A pause. "Then tell Kowalczyk. The Caldwell heir has a weakness now, and it's not going anywhere." Inside, Lily and Ethan remained unaware, wrapped in each other in the quiet, fragile miracle they had stumbled into. The world outside could wait, for tonight, in the stillness between heartbeats, two broken souls had found something stronger than fear. They had found each other. And nothing, not poverty, not power, not the gathering storm, would tear them apart without a fight. The 8th day of Lily's 10-day promise dawned cold and gray over Lake Michigan, the kind of October morning that pressed against the windows like a warning. Inside the penthouse, everything remained deceptively serene. Noah nursed contentedly at her breast, while Mia and Caleb played on a thick wool rug with wooden blocks that had never known a splinter. The air smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon toast breakfast prepared by the housekeeper, who moved like a shadow, never meeting Lily's eyes. Lily had begun to breathe more easily here. The constant gnawing hunger in her stomach had quieted. The dark circles beneath her eyes had faded to faint violet shadows. She had slept, truly slept, for the first time in years, waking only to feed the babies, never to the bite of cold wind through cracked plaster or the dread of an eviction notice. And Ethan. Ethan was everywhere and nowhere. He worked from a study down the hall door, always ajar, so she could see the outline of his broad shoulders bent over papers, phone pressed to his ear in low, controlled tones. He came to every feeding, every diaper change, every quiet moment when the babies napped. He touched her constantly, now small, careful touches a hand at the small of her back when he passed, fingers brushing hers. When he handed her a mug of tea, a kiss, pressed to her temple at night, when he thought she was asleep, each touch burned deeper than the last. She was falling so hard it felt like drowning in sunlight. But the world outside had not forgotten them. It began with a phone call at 3:17 in the afternoon. Lily was in the kitchen slicing apples for the twins when Ethan's phone rang on the marble island. He answered immediately, voice flat. "Talk." A pause. His entire body went rigid. "How many?" Another pause. And the message, Lily froze, knife hovering above the cutting board. Ethan ended the call without another word. He stood motionless for several heartbeats, then turned to her. His face was carved from stone. "Someone bombed one of my warehouses on the west side," he said quietly. "2 others hit at the same time, distraction. They left a note." Lily's heart stuttered. What did it say, Ethan's? Jaw worked. "They want the woman who feeds the Caldwell heir. By midnight tomorrow, or they start burning everything I own." The knife slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Lily felt the room spin. She gripped the edge of the island to keep from falling. No, she whispered. No, this is my fault. Ethan crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, hands cupping her face, thumbs brushing away, tears she hadn't realized were falling. Listen to me, he said fiercely. This is not your fault. This is what happens when people see something they want to break, and they will not touch you. Not you. Not the children. I swear it on my life. Lily shook her head, tears streaming. They'll kill you. They'll hurt the babies. I should go. I should, no. The word was a growl. You go nowhere. He pulled her against him, arms like iron bands. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling the scent of wool and cedar, and him the only solid thing in a world suddenly tilting into chaos. That night, the penthouse became a fortress. Extra men arrived, silent, armed faces she had never seen. Windows were shuttered with steel panels that slid down like eyelids. The babies were moved to an interior room with reinforced walls and a separate air system. Ethan never left her side. At 11:43, another call. He stepped into the hallway to take it. When he returned, his eyes were black with fury. They hit the distribution center on the south side, he said. No casualties. Yet. Lily stood in the doorway of the nursery, arms wrapped around herself. What do we do? Ethan looked at her, really looked, and something inside him seemed to fracture. I go, he said simply. Lily's heart stopped. You can't. I have to. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. If I don't show strength now, they'll keep coming. They'll never stop. Tears burned her eyes. And if you don't come back, Ethan cupped her face again, thumbs stroking her cheeks. Then you take the children and you run. There's a safe house in Wisconsin, keys in the top drawer of my desk. Cash. Documents. Everything you need for a new life. Lily shook her head violently. I won't leave you. You will. His voice broke. For them. For Noah. For Mia and Caleb. You will. He kissed her, then hard, desperate tasting of salt and fear and love, so fierce it hurt. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. I love you, he said. The words came out raw, like they had been torn from his chest. I've loved you since the moment you offered to feed my son on that plane. I love you more than power, more than this city, more than my own life. And I will come back to you. Lily clutched his sweater. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her forehead, lingered there for one endless moment, then turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Lily sank to the floor outside the nursery, knees to her chest, rocking silently while the babies slept. She had nothing again. She had everything. And the man who had given it to her was walking into a war for her sake. Downstairs in the underground garage, Ethan slid into the driver's seat of a matte black SUV. 2 of his best men waited in the back. He drove himself. The streets of Chicago were quiet, rain-slicked, reflecting the sodium glow of streetlights. He took the long way, circling blocks, watching mirrors. At a red light on Halsted, a black sedan pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. A man Lily would never know, mid-40s, scarred cheek, cold eyes, leaned out. Caldwell, he said pleasantly. Kowalczyk sends regards. Nice girl you got up there. Thin little thing. Looks like she'd break easy. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel until the leather creaked. You touch her, he said softly, and I will erase every trace of your family from this city. Your children, your grandchildren, your name. Gone. The man smiled. Then give us what we want. Midnight. The light turned green. Ethan drove forward without another word. At the warehouse on the west side, still smoldering, still reeking of accelerant, he stepped out alone. Kowalczyk's second in command waited beneath the floodlights, flanked by 4 men. You came, the man said, surprised. I came. The man glanced around. No army. I don't need an army to protect what's mine. Silence. Then the man laughed short, ugly. You think love makes you strong, love makes you weak. Hand her over. We'll let the kid live. Maybe even the twins. Ethan's voice was calm. Deadly calm. You have until sunrise to decide whether you want to live through tomorrow. After that, I stop asking nicely. He turned and walked back to his vehicle. No one stopped him. In the penthouse, Lily waited. She sat on the floor outside the nursery door, back against the wall, knees drawn up, rocking slowly. Every creak of the building made her flinch. Every distant siren made her heart lurch. She whispered prayers she hadn't said since childhood. She thought of the nights she had spent on the fire escape, wind cutting through her sweater, promising the stars she would do better, be stronger, keep her babies safe. She thought of Ethan's mouth on hers, his voice breaking when he said he loved her. She thought of how she had once believed love was something that happened to other people. Now it was happening to her, and it might kill the only man who had ever truly seen her. At 4:27 in the morning, the elevator chimed. Lily scrambled to her feet, heart in her throat. The doors opened. Ethan stood there, coat torn at the shoulder cheek. bruised eyes burning. He looked at her. She ran. He caught her in the middle of the foyer, arms crushing her against him so hard she couldn't breathe. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. "I'm here." Lily sobbed against his chest, ugly, wrenching sobs that shook them both. He held her tighter. The war had begun, and neither of them would ever be the same. The clock on the penthouse wall ticked past 4 a.m, each second a small hammer against Lily's ribs. She had not moved from the foyer floor since Ethan left hours earlier. Her knees were drawn tight to her chest, arms wrapped around them, rocking in the smallest possible rhythm, the same motion she had once used on cold nights when the heat was cut off and the twins cried from hunger. The marble was freezing beneath her, but she barely felt it. Numbness had settled in her bones like an old friend. She kept replaying his last words, "I love you. I will come back to you." The promise felt fragile now, like something written on paper and left outside in the rain. At 5:12, the private elevator chimed. Lily scrambled upright so fast her vision blurred. The door slid open. Ethan stepped out. His coat was gone. The charcoal sweater he had worn when he kissed her goodbye was torn at the shoulder, dark streaks of soot and something wetter across the chest. A bruise was already blooming along his jawline, purple and angry. His left hand was wrapped in a makeshift bandage torn from his own shirt. Blood had seeped through. But he was alive. He saw her. For one heartbeat, neither moved. Then Lily ran. She crashed into him so hard he staggered back a step. His arms closed around her like steel bands, crushing her against his chest. She felt the rapid thud of his heart against her ear, smelled smoke and sweat, and the faint metallic tang of blood. She clutched fistfuls of his ruined sweater face buried in the hollow of his throat. "You came back," she choked out. "You promised." "I always keep my promises to you," he whispered against her hair. His voice cracked on the last word. Lily pulled back just enough to look at him. Her hands framed his face, careful trembling, searching for more injuries for proof that he was real. "You're hurt." "Surface wounds." He tried to smile. It came out crooked and pained. "Nothing compared to what I thought I'd find when I walked into that warehouse." She searched his eyes. "What did you do, Ethan?" Exhaled a long, shuddering breath. "I offered them everything," he said quietly. "Territory on the west side, control of 3 shipping routes, half the construction contracts, all of it, in exchange for leaving you alone, for leaving the children alone." Lily's knees buckled. Ethan caught her, lowered them both to the floor, still holding her tight. "You were going to give up half your life." Her voice was small, disbelieving. "I was going to give up all of it if they asked." His thumb stroked her cheek, wiping away fresh tears. "The moment they mentioned your name, Lily, the moment they said they could make you break. There was no price too high." She stared at him, chest heaving. "And they refused." Ethan's expression darkened. "They laughed. Said they'd take you anyway. Said they'd make an example of the milk mother who thought she could hide behind love." Lily felt the world tilt again, dizzying, nauseating. Ethan tightened his hold. They never had the chance. He told her then in short, careful sentences what had happened. He had walked into the warehouse alone, hands visible, unarmed. Kowalczyk's men had surrounded him immediately. They had searched him twice. They had mocked him openly, called him soft, called him broken, called him a fool, for falling in love with a Southside waitress who still smelled faintly of desperation. Ethan had let them talk. Then when the leader stepped forward to seal the deal with a handshake, Ethan had moved. Not with violence in the brutal sense, not with guns or blades, with precision. A signal barely perceptible from his hand. The warehouse lights had died. Darkness. Then the sound of boots on concrete, his men hidden in the rafters behind crates inside ventilation shafts. A coordinated sweep. No gunfire. No screams. Just swift, silent restraint. The Kowalczyk crew had been disarmed, bound left kneeling on the cold floor while Ethan walked among them like a ghost. He had looked down at the second in command, the man who had threatened her and spoken 4 words. "You touched what's mine." Then he had turned and walked out. His men had stayed behind to deliver the message the Caldwell family was no longer negotiating. Lily listened in stunned silence. When he finished, she whispered, "You could have died. I know. And you still went. For you." He cupped her face again, eyes burning. "Always for you." Lily's tears fell faster now, hot, unstoppable. She leaned forward and kissed him, desperate, grateful, terrified. It tasted of salt and smoke and survival. When they parted, both were shaking. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm so scared of what this means, of what I've brought into your life." Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "You brought light," he said simply. "You brought hope. You brought me back from being a man who only knew how to take, and I will spend every day making sure you never regret it." He helped her stand. They walked together to the nursery. The babies were still asleep, innocent, untouched by the night's violence. Ethan stood behind her arms, wrapped around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Look at them," he whispered. "They're safe because of you. Because you chose to help a stranger's child on a plane. Because you stayed." Lily reached back, threaded her fingers through his. "I stayed because of you," she said softly. "Because the moment you looked at me like I mattered, I couldn't leave." Ethan turned her in his arms. He kissed her again, slow, deep, reverent. When he pulled away, his voice was rough with emotion. "I'm done," he said. "I'm stepping away. I'm giving the family to my cousin Sean. He's wanted it for years. The council will accept it, especially after tonight. They respect sacrifice. They respect love that's stronger than power." Lily stared at him. "You're serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." He took her hand, pressed it over his heart. "I want a life with you," he said. "Not this one. A real one. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere the children can grow up without looking over their shoulders. Somewhere you never have to be cold or hungry or afraid again." Lily's throat closed. She thought of the nights on the fire escape, wind slicing through her thin sweater. She thought of the pawn shop where she'd sold her mother's ring. She thought of the landlord's sneer, and she thought of this man bruised, bleeding, offering her the world. "I want that too," she whispered. "More than anything." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Then we'll have it," he promised. Outside in the pre-dawn streets, the city began to wake. Sirens wailed in the distance, police finally arriving at the warehouse. Reporters would follow. Rumors would spread. The Caldwell family had drawn a line in blood, but inside the penthouse in the quiet nursery, 2 people stood wrapped in each other, 3 babies sleeping peacefully between them. The war had come, and love had answered. Stronger, fiercer, unbreakable. The penthouse felt different after dawn broke on October 30th, 2025. The steel shutters had been raised, letting in pale, watery light that washed across marble floors and silk drapes like an apology. The babies slept on in the nursery, unaware that the world outside had tried to tear their small family apart only hours before. Inside, however, everything had already shattered and begun to reform in ways neither Lily nor Ethan could have foreseen. Lily sat on the edge of the massive bed in the master suite, still wearing the soft gray cashmere sweater Ethan had draped over her shoulders when he returned. The fabric was warm, impossibly soft, scented faintly of his cologne and smoke. She kept smoothing her palms over the sleeves as though the motion could smooth the jagged edges inside her chest. Ethan stood at the window, back to her shoulders, rigid beneath the fresh black shirt he had changed into. The bruise on his jaw had deepened to a violent plum color. His left hand, now properly bandaged by the private physician who had come and gone without a word, rested at his side like something foreign. Neither had spoken for almost 20 minutes. The silence was not empty. It was thick with everything they had not yet dared to name. Finally, Ethan turned. His eyes found hers immediately, dark, exhausted, blazing with something that looked very close to fear. "I meant what I said," he began quietly. "I'm done." Lily's throat tightened. "You can't just walk away from all of this. I already have." He crossed the room slowly, as though every step cost him. "I spoke to the council an hour ago. Sean is taking over. The transition papers are being drawn up as we speak. They're reluctant, but they understand, especially after last night." He knelt in front of her again, the gesture that had become their private ritual of surrender. "They respect sacrifice," he said, "and they respect a man who chooses love over power. It's rare enough to make them pause." Lily reached out, fingertips trembling, and traced the edge of the bruise on his face. He closed his eyes at the touch. "You're giving up everything you built," she whispered. "For me. For us." His voice was rough. "For Noah. For Mia and Caleb. For the life we could have if I stop pretending power is the only thing that keeps people safe." Tears welled in her eyes again. "What if they don't let you go? They will." He opened his eyes, gaze fierce. "Because the moment word spreads that the Caldwell heir has a sacred milk mother, a woman who saved him when no one else could, they won't dare touch us. Not without risking the wrath of every old family from here to Boston." Lily's breath hitched. She thought of the nights she had spent huddled under a single blanket with the twins' wind whistling through broken seals in the windows, promising herself she would never let them feel as small and forgotten as she did. She thought of the landlord's laughter when she begged for one more week. She thought of the pawnshop owner counting out $47 for her mother's ring like it was nothing. And she thought of this man, bruised, bleeding, kneeling before her, offering to lay down an empire because she had once fed his son. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Ethan cupped her face with both hands, gentle despite the bandage, despite the blood still crusted beneath his nails. "You deserve everything," he said, voice cracking. "You deserve warmth. You deserve safety. You deserve someone who sees you and chooses you every single day, no matter what it costs." Lily's tears spilled over. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I love you," she said, soft, broken, true. "I've loved you since you looked at me in that airport like I was something precious. I've been terrified of it. But I love you." Ethan made a sound low in his throat, half sob, half prayer. He kissed her, then slow, deep, reverent. It tasted of salt and smoke and promises kept against impossible odds. When they parted, he stayed close, breathing her in. "I'm taking you away from here," he murmured. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere the children can run without walls. Somewhere you never have to be cold again." Lily nodded against his shoulder, but even as relief flooded her, a new fear took root. "What if they come after us?" she asked. "What if leaving isn't enough?" Ethan pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Then I fight," he said simply. "Not with guns, not with territory, with every resource I have left. And I will win, because nothing will take you from me." Outside in the hallway, the elevator chimed. Footsteps. A quiet knock. Ethan rose, every line of his body shifting back into the posture of command. He opened the door. His cousin Sean stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes wary but respectful. "It's done," Sean said quietly. "The council accepted. They want a formal ceremony next week. Neutral ground. They'll recognize your retirement. And they'll recognize her." His gaze slid past Ethan to Lily, who had risen to stand behind him. Sean inclined his head. "Miss Harper, you saved the air. That carries weight even the old men can't ignore." Lily felt the weight of his words like a physical thing pressing on her chest. Sean left as quietly as he had come. Ethan closed the door, turned and pulled Lily back into his arms. "It's over," he whispered. "Or it's beginning." She clung to him, tears soaking his shirt. For the first time in her life, the future felt like something she could hold instead of something that would slip through her fingers like smoke. Later that afternoon, while the babies napped, Ethan led her to the rooftop terrace. Chicago spread out below them, gray lake, glittering towers, streets that had once felt like a cage. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Tell me where you want to go," he said softly. "Anywhere. Montana, Maine, some little town in Michigan with a lake and trees. Anywhere you feel safe." Lily leaned back against him. "Somewhere with space," she said. "Somewhere the babies can run. Somewhere I can plant flowers and not worry about them being stolen." Ethan kissed the side of her neck, soft, lingering. "Then that's where we'll go." She turned in his arms. "Look at me," she said quietly. He did. "I was nothing," she whispered. "I had nothing. I thought love was something that happened to other people. I thought safety was a fairy tale." Her voice trembled. "And then you looked at me. You saw me. You chose me. And now I have everything." Ethan's eyes filled. "You were never nothing," he said hoarsely. "You were always everything. I was just too broken to see it until you saved my son. Until you saved me." They stood there on the rooftop, wrapped in each other while the city moved on beneath them. The war had ended. Not with blood. Not with power. With mercy. With choice. With love so fierce it had rewritten the rules of an entire world. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, two people who had once believed they would always be alone began to believe in forever. 3 months had passed since the night Ethan walked out of the warehouse and back into Lily's arms. 3 months of fragile, miraculous peace in the Gold Coast penthouse, while the world outside slowly adjusted to the new order. The Caldwell family had transitioned under Sean's steady hand. The old guard grumbled but accepted the change. Whispers of the milk mother who had tamed the untouchable boss had spread through the underground like smoke, half legend, half warning. No one dared test it. Lily had begun to believe, really believe, that the storm was over. She had gained weight. Color had returned to her cheeks. The twins ran barefoot across thick rugs and laughed at the sound their feet made. Noah, now almost 5 months old, reached for her with chubby hands and gummy smiles whenever she entered a room. She had learned the rhythm of this new life. Quiet mornings with coffee on the terrace, afternoons of playtime and naps, evenings where Ethan came home early and held her like she might vanish if he let go. She had started to dream again, small dreams, tentative ones. A little house with a yard. A garden where she could plant marigolds and not worry about them being trampled or stolen. A life where no one ever called her sweetheart with a sneer. She had started to trust. That trust shattered on a cold Thursday evening in late January 2026. The penthouse was quiet. The babies were asleep in the nursery. Lily had slipped into the hallway to get a glass of water when she heard Ethan's voice, low, urgent, coming from the study. She froze bare feet, silent on the warm hardwood. "The council meeting is set for next week. Neutral ground. They want final assurances that I'm truly out. No loose ends. No back doors. A pause. The faint crackle of a speakerphone. "And the woman, the children, they're protected," Ethan said. "The blood oath stands. No one touches them. Ever." Another pause. "You understand what this looks like, Ethan. You walk away clean while the rest of us clean up the mess you left. Some of the old men are restless." "I don't care what they feel," Ethan answered, voice edged with steel. "I'm done. Tell them that. Tell them if anyone comes near my family, I'll remind them why they used to fear my name." The call ended. Lily stood in the shadowed hallway, glass trembling in her hand. Water sloshed over her fingers, cold against her skin. Meeting. Council. Blood oath. He had told her it was over. He had promised. But the words echoed in her head like accusations next week. Final assurances. No loose ends. Her knees gave out. She slid down the wall, glass clattering to the floor, water pooling around her. He was going back. He had to be. Why else the secrecy? Why else the late-night calls she had pretended not to hear? Why else the way his eyes sometimes drifted when he held her, as though part of him was already somewhere else? The old terror rushed back, the one she had, known on cold nights in the South Side apartment wind, slicing through broken windows, promising herself she would never let anyone close enough to hurt her again. She had let him in. She had let him love her, and now he was leaving, or worse, pulling her and the children back into the darkness he had sworn to escape. Lily pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle the sob that clawed its way up her throat. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only feel the violent tearing inside her chest, the same tearing she had felt the night Emma died. Only this time it was worse because she had dared to hope. By midnight the decision was made. She moved like a ghost through the penthouse, silent, methodical, numb. She packed one small duffel clothes for the babies, diapers, formula, the few things that were truly hers. She left the cashmere sweaters, the silk dresses, the soft blankets Ethan had bought. They felt like chains now. She lifted Mia first, then Caleb, bundling them in thick blankets against the January cold. Noah stirred when she lifted him from the crib. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, whispering apologies she knew he couldn't understand. She took the service elevator Ethan had shown her once in case of emergency. The night doorman looked startled when he saw her with 3 sleeping babies in a single bag. "Miss Harper is everything, please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Don't tell him." "Not yet." The man hesitated, then nodded once. He called a cab without another word. Outside, the wind hit her like a slap, sharp, bitter, familiar. It smelled of exhaust and snow and the old life she had almost escaped. She climbed into the cab with shaking hands. "Union Station," she told the driver. "Please, hurry." The cab pulled away from the curb. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the glittering building grow smaller in the rearview mirror. She felt nothing. She felt everything. The tearing inside her was so violent it left her breathless, grief, betrayal, love so deep it felt like dying. She had believed him. She had let herself believe in forever. And now she was running again, thin coat, thin hope, 3 babies who depended on her to keep them safe from the very man she loved more than life. The train station was nearly empty at that hour. She bought tickets with the last of the cash Ethan had insisted she keep just in case. A one-way to Milwaukee, far enough to disappear, close enough to vanish into the Midwest sprawl, if she needed to keep moving. She sat on a hard plastic bench, babies cradled against her, and stared at the flickering departure board. Her body shook not from cold but from the force of the sobs she could no longer hold back. She had been poor before. She had been broken before. But she had never felt this kind of emptiness, because this time the emptiness had a name. Ethan. And the love she still felt for him, burning, relentless, impossible, was the sharpest blade of all. She pressed her lips to Noah's soft hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The train announcement crackled overhead. Milwaukee. Boarding now. Lily stood. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She walked toward the platform, each step heavier than the last. Behind her in the penthouse she had fled. Ethan woke suddenly, heart-pounding, instinct screaming. He reached for her side of the bed. Empty. He was on his feet in an instant, running barefoot through the halls, calling her name. The nursery was dark. The cribs were empty. The closet held only the clothes she had left behind. He found the note on the kitchen counter, single sheet of paper, her handwriting small and trembling. "You lied. I heard you. I can't do this again. I can't let them grow up in a world that might take you away. I love you. I'm sorry." Ethan crumpled the paper in his fist. He sank to his knees on the cold marble floor. The man who had once commanded fear across an entire city broke quietly, completely, utterly. He had lost her. Not to rivals, not to violence. To his own secrets. To the life he had sworn he left behind. And the tearing inside him now was worse than any wound he had ever taken. because this time he had no one to blame but himself. The cab from Union Station had dropped Lily and the 3 babies at a small, dimly lit bus depot on the south edge of Milwaukee just before dawn. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through her thin coat like knives. She sat on a cold metal bench inside the mostly empty terminal, the babies bundled in every layer she had managed to pack. Mia and Caleb slept fitfully against her sides. Noah lay in her lap, tiny face pressed to her chest, rooting even in sleep. Her breasts ached full again, useless now that she had run from the one child she had been feeding. She had no plan beyond away. Away from the penthouse. Away from the lies she had overheard. Away from the man whose love had felt like salvation and now felt like another trap. Her hands shook as she counted the remaining cash, barely enough for 2 bus tickets farther north and a cheap motel for a night or 2. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Hunger was an old acquaintance. She knew how to ignore it. But the emptiness in her chest was new and vicious, a tearing so deep she sometimes forgot how to breathe. Outside snow had begun to fall, fine stinging flakes that swirled under the sodium lights. The depot's heater rattled uselessly. Lily pulled the blanket tighter around the children and whispered nonsense to keep herself calm. "I've got you," she murmured. "I've always got you." She didn't hear the black SUV until it was already pulling up outside the glass doors. The driver's door opened before the engine died. Ethan stepped out into the snow. He wore no coat, only the black sweater and jeans he must have thrown on when he discovered them gone. His hair was wet with melting flakes. His face bruised, jaw still purple, was pale with something beyond cold. He saw her through the glass. For one endless second, neither moved. Then he walked straight toward the doors. Lily's heart slammed against her ribs so hard she felt dizzy. She clutched the babies tighter, half rising from the bench, half frozen in place. Ethan pushed through the doors. Cold air rushed in with him. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough for her to see the tremor in his hands, far enough to give her space to run. "Lily," he said. His voice cracked on her name. She couldn't speak. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Ethan took one slow step forward, palms open. "I'm not here to take you back," he said quietly. "I'm here to explain. And then if you still want to leave, I'll let you go." Lily's throat worked. "You lied to me." "I didn't." He swallowed hard. The meeting was about closing the last loopholes, about making sure no one could challenge my retirement, about getting written guarantees signed by every major player that you and the children would be untouchable. Forever. Even if something happened to me. She stared at him, chest heaving. "I didn't tell you," he continued, voice raw, "because I didn't want you to worry. Because every time I thought about bringing it up, I saw your face when you told me you were scared. I thought keeping it quiet would protect you from the fear." Lily laughed, a small broken sound. "Protect me? By letting me overhear you talking about no loose ends. By letting me think you were going back." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, pain carving deeper lines into his face. "I failed you," he said. Again. "I thought I was shielding you. Instead, I made you run into a snowstorm with 3 babies in the middle of the night. I made you think I chose power over you." He took another step, then another. Lily didn't move. Snow melted in his hair and dripped down his temples. He looked wrecked, utterly, completely wrecked. "I love you," he said, voice breaking. "I love you so much it hurts to breathe when you're not near me. I've spent my whole life thinking love was a weakness. Then you walked onto that plane and showed me it's the only strength that matters." He dropped to his knees on the dirty depot floor, right there in front of the ticket counter, the sleeping security guard, the flickering vending machines. Snow melted into dark patches around him. "I'm begging you," he whispered. "Don't run from me. Don't run from us. Let me fix this. Let me prove I'm yours, not the family's, not the city's. Yours." Lily's vision blurred with tears. She looked down at the babies sleeping, trusting fragile, and felt the violent clash inside her. Terror and longing, betrayal and love. The old instinct to flee, warring with the new instinct to stay. She took one shaking step forward. Then another. Ethan didn't move. He stayed on his knees, head bowed, waiting for judgment. Lily stopped in front of him. Slowly, she shifted Noah to one arm and reached out with her free hand. Her fingers brushed his wet hair, then cupped his cheek. Ethan looked up. His eyes were wet too. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost you again. Not to death, to the life. To the secrets. I know." His voice was hoarse. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel that way again." Lily sank to her knees in front of him, right there on the cold, gritty floor. She set Noah carefully between them, cocooned in blankets. Then she reached for Ethan. He met her halfway. Their kiss was desperate, clumsy, soaked with snowmelt and tears. It tasted of salt and relief and love so fierce it burned. Ethan's hands framed her face like she was breakable. Lily clutched his sweater like he might disappear. The world narrowed to the press of mouths, the mingling of breaths, the thudding of two hearts that had almost lost each other. When they finally parted, both were trembling. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered against her lips. "I'm so sorry." "I'm sorry too," she breathed. "I should have waited. I should have asked." He shook his head. "You did what any mother would do. You protected them." He rested his forehead against hers. "Come home," he said softly. "Please, let me take you home." Lily looked at the sleeping babies, then back at the man who had knelt in the snow for her. She nodded once, small, certain. Ethan exhaled a long, shuddering breath of relief. He stood first, then helped her up. He took Noah gently, cradling the baby against his chest. Lily lifted Mia and Caleb, one in each arm. Together they walked out of the depot into the falling snow. The black SUV waited at the curb engine, running heat blasting. Ethan opened the rear door. Inside were 3 car seats already installed, already warm. He had come prepared to bring them home. Lily buckled the twins in with shaking hands. Ethan secured Noah. When everyone was safe, he closed the door softly and turned to her. The snow fell thicker now, catching in her eyelashes, melting on her cheeks. Ethan stepped close, cupped her face with both hands. "I love you," he said again, quiet, fierce, eternal, "and I will never give you reason to run again." Lily rose on her toes and kissed him, slow, deep, claiming, "I love you too," she whispered against his mouth. "Take us home." He wrapped his arms around her, lifting her slightly off the ground, holding her like something infinitely precious. They stood there in the snowstorm, wrapped in each other while the wind howled around them. Inside the SUV, 3 babies slept on. Outside, 2 people who had almost lost everything found it again, stronger, deeper, more certain than before. The storm raged, but they were no longer afraid. The northern Michigan winter of 2026 arrived, gently blanketing the world in soft white silence. The lake house Ethan had purchased sat on 30 acres of pine and birch, the kind of place where the only sounds after dusk were the crackle of the fireplace and the distant call of an owl. No sirens, no whispered threats carried on the wind, just stillness and the small, perfect chaos of 3 growing children. It was early April now, the snow finally melting into rivulets that ran silver across the yard. Crocuses Lily had planted the previous autumn pushed stubborn green tips through the thawing earth. She watched them from the wide kitchen window, while she warmed milk for Noah's bottle, her hair loose around her shoulders, a soft cotton sweater hanging gently over the gentle swell of her belly. 4 months along, a little girl this time, the ultrasound had shown. They had already chosen the name Emma Rose. Ethan came in through the back door, stomping snow from his boots, arms full of split firewood. He paused when he saw her, always paused, as though every glimpse of her still caught him by surprise. He set the wood in the rack, crossed the room in 3 strides, and wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Morning," he murmured against her neck. "Morning." She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. The babies were awake now, Mia and Caleb, toddling around the living room in mismatched socks. Noah sitting in his high chair, banging a wooden spoon against the tray with delighted fury. Ordinary sounds. Sacred sounds. They had built this life one careful brick at a time. Ethan had kept his word. He never returned to Chicago, except once for the formal council ceremony, where he surrendered the last symbols of power, signed the final documents, and walked away under the watchful eyes of men who once feared him. Sean had taken the reins cleanly. The families respected the choice. The blood oath protecting Lily and the children remained ironclad, etched into the old codes that still governed the underworld even when its king had left the throne. No one came after them. No one dared. And in the quiet that followed, Ethan became someone new. He learned to chop wood instead of signing orders. He learned the names of local birds instead of rival crews. He learned how to sit still long enough to read bedtime stories without glancing at the door for threats that no longer existed. Lily watched the transformation with a mixture of wonder and aching love. The man who once commanded silence in crowded rooms now knelt in the dirt to show Caleb how to plant carrot seeds. The man who had once carried the weight of an empire now carried Noah on his shoulders through the woods, pointing out deer tracks and teaching him the sound of wind through pine needles. Love had not made him weak. It had made him whole. One evening in late spring, as the sun dipped low and painted the lake gold, Ethan found Lily on the porch swing, wrapped in a quilt, watching the children chase fireflies in the yard. He sat beside her, their thighs touching, fingers naturally finding each other. "I still wake up sometimes," he said quietly, "thinking I've lost you. Thinking this is the dream and the old life is waiting when I open my eyes." Lily squeezed his hand. "I wake up the same way, thinking the cold apartment, the empty cupboards, the nights I cried myself to sleep so the babies wouldn't hear, that those are still real and this is the fairy tale." He turned to face her, fully eyes soft in the dying light. But it's not a fairy tale, he said. It's a choice. Every day. I choose you. I choose them. I choose this quiet, ordinary, beautiful life over everything I ever thought mattered. Lily rested her head on his shoulder. I was so afraid love would cost me everything, she whispered. Instead, it gave me everything I never dared to want. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the children's laughter drift across the grass. Then Ethan spoke again, voice low and reverent. Love doesn't see skin color. It doesn't measure bank accounts. It doesn't care about the past. It only asks one question. Will you choose me, even when it's hard? And when two people answer yes, truly yes, then nothing. Not poverty, not power, not the whole world can separate them. Lily lifted her head, tears shimmering in her eyes. That's the real knowledge, she said softly. Knowledge of what truly matters. The lesson is always the same. Compassion is stronger than cruelty, forgiveness deeper than resentment. Education of the heart teaches us to see each other clearly without judgment. Knowledge reminds us we're all just trying to make it through the dark nights. The lesson of love is that it chooses kindness, even when fear screams to run. Education of the soul shows us that real wealth is measured in moments like this, quiet, shared, unbreakable. She smiled through her tears. And that is the greatest knowledge of all. Ethan kissed her gently, then rested his forehead against hers. They stayed like that until the stars came out. Later, after the children were asleep and the house settled into its nighttime hush, Ethan pulled Lily close on the couch in front of the fire. I'm grateful every day, he murmured. For you. For this. For the chance to be better. Lily traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. We both got a second chance, she said. And we took it, together. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the lake whispered against the shore. Inside, love burned steady and bright. To everyone watching this video, may you all enjoy good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the story of Lily and Ethan. Please subscribe to the channel Alex Truths like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that love can heal even the deepest wounds. How did this story make you feel? In what ways does it connect to your own real life? Please share your thoughts and emotions in the comments below. I read every single one, and I truly want to hear what stirs in your hearts. Until next time, goodbye, and I promise I'll see you again in the very next video. Disclaimer. All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.